Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Ramla Farzad, and I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at K&L Gates. And on behalf of the Diversity Committee, I am so excited to welcome Dr. Harry Williams, who's going to be having a conversation with our own Paul Sweeney today. And we are looking forward to an exciting discussion. We've got about 1,500 people who have RSVP'd for this event, so it's going to be a good one. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Paul and Dr. Williams.
Okay, thank you very much, Ramla. Good day to everybody. And let me first thank Mike Cassis, our global chairman, Jim Sagerdahl, who is our global managing partner, and Pallavi Wahi, who is our global diversity committee chair, and management as well. And of course, thank all of you for taking the time to join us this morning. Special thanks to our guest speaker here, Dr. Harry Williams, who is the CEO and president of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. I'll be referring to Thurgood Marshall College Fund as TMCF because it's kind of a mouthful. I'll briefly introduce Dr. Williams, and then we'll engage in about a 50-minute discussion of historically Black colleges and universities, the key role that they've played in the past, and the role that they're playing presently. So let me begin with a very brief introduction of Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams, as I indicated, is president and CEO of TMCF. He came to TMCF from Delaware State University, where he was the president of that university. That is a historically Black college, an HBCU. And Dr. Williams is highly educated. He has a bachelor and master's degree from Appalachian State University in North Carolina, and a doctorate degree from East Tennessee State University. He's a family man, and his wife has a doctorate, and he's got two sons, both of whom attended an HBCU. So with that as a brief introduction, let's get to our discussion. And Harry, I'm going to begin by asking you if you can tell us just generally background. What is TMCF? Why was it started? What connection does it have with Thurgood Marshall?
Well, first of all, Paul, let me say thank you to you and your team for putting on this opportunity to share with your partners. And I want to say good morning to everybody on the West Coast and good afternoon to people on the East Coast. I'm based here in Washington, D.C., and I'm so delighted to be with you all this morning to talk about TMCF and to talk about the role that we play in the community with HBCUs. Thurgood Marshall Fund was created in 1987 by our founder, Dr. Joyce Payne, who had the vision to create an organization that would represent and support the historically Black colleges that are public. And there's a big distinction between the public HBCUs and the private HBCUs. The public HBCUs are those institutions that are supported by their states. And there are 47 public HBCUs, and the public HBCUs represent 85% of the Black students attending HBCUs in this country. And so therefore we have the largest percentage of HBCU students attend public HBCUs. The private ones, there are about 37 of those, but there are a total over 300,000 students attending HBCUs. And Thurgood Marshall Fund was created in the honor of the late Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. And the founder, Dr. Joyce Payne, actually had the vision to name this fund after someone whose name would be recognized literally all over the world, to raise money to support our students that are attending these institutions. So she did not have a relationship with the Supreme Court Justice, but she had a vision, and she was committed to trying to see if he would be willing to lend his name. So this is a true story that I'm getting ready to share with you all, that Dr. Payne was working in Washington, D.C., and she actually literally went to the Supreme Court and met with Justice Marshall and asked him if he would allow for his name to be used for this fund. And of course, he wanted to know why me? And he said to, Dr. Payne said to him, you graduated from two public HBCUs. Lincoln University in Pennsylvania is where he got his undergraduate degree, and he graduated #1 in his class. And then he went on and got his law degree from Howard University. And Howard University is a part of the Thurgood Marshall family. And as you all know, is supported by the federal government. And so therefore, you being that image and that role model to support these students to show that they can achieve their dreams by working hard. So by getting him to agree, and he really on the spot said, I'm in, because I understand the value of it. I understand that you're going to be raising money to support these students so they can graduate. And one point to make note for the people who are listening here, the students that attend HBCUs, in particular the public HBCUs, 73% of those students qualify for Pell Grant. And a Pell Grant is a federally funded entitlement program that is set up for students who come from low-income communities, low-income families have low income. So therefore, in order to qualify for Pell, the maximum amount of money that your family can have coming in for a family of 4 is $26,000. So as you can do the numbers and see that a large percentage of our students fall into that category, and they need additional support so that they can graduate from college. So by creating this fund, it would allow for TMCF to support those students throughout their journey for education in terms of their path towards education, so that they can be successful. So the Supreme Court Justice literally signed a signature, and we have a letter here that he signed giving TMCF the rights, the privileges to use his name to raise money. And we've been doing that now for over 33 years successfully. And having people like you, Paul, on our board helping us has been a big asset, a big support for our organization. We're so proud that you are part of our organization as a board member, and how you help us in terms of supporting our HBCU. So that's kind of an overview of TMCF in terms of how I got started and where we are heading as an organization.
Let me also ask you, Harry, aside from raising money for the HBCUs, what additional activities is TMCF involved in?
So we basically have 3 pillars. The core of our organization is scholarships. That was the core focus. But Dr. Payne also recognized that these students, majority of students, will be classified as first generation, meaning they're the first ones in their family to go to college. So in order for them to move through this educational pipeline, we recognize that some of these students will need door openers, opportunities for careers in major corporations. So we have a very powerful leadership program designed specifically for students and focusing these students on preparing them for major careers in corporations. So we have internship programs with major Fortune 500 companies such as Boeing. Boeing is a big partner of ours. We annually provide them with interns for their students so that they can eventually have full-time employment at Boeing. We have a big partnership with Apple. Apple is one of our major supporters in internships. We actually average about 35 interns a year for Apple. We also provide coaching and preparation and getting these young people ready. We have a leadership conference that we've been doing now. This is going to be our 20th anniversary, where we invite a select group of TMCF scholars, about 400, to come to Washington, D.C. And at that time, they will go through here for a week, and we prepare them for interviews with major Fortune 500 companies. We prepare them for interviews to go to law school for students who are interested in pursuing a career in law. We work with law schools in that preparation period to get students ready. So our leadership development program is very, very strong in helping our students. So not only we want to help them graduate, but we also want them to have outstanding careers after graduating. So we work with major companies to secure employment opportunities for these young people. In addition to the third pillar that's affiliated with our organization is our advocacy. We're based here in Washington, D.C., and we work directly with Congress. DMCF is a bipartisan organization, so we work with both sides of the House in securing funds for our institutions. As I indicated earlier, a lot of our students are very needy and they need financial assistance. So we work directly with the Education Committee in the House, and on the Senate side, we work with the Department of Education directly to make sure that our students are being represented and advocating on their behalf.
Okay. Well, with that general background on TMCF, I want to take us back in history. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about why are there HBCUs and why did they get started?
Well, it's kind of interesting. That's a very good question. HBCUs have been around for a long, long time. The oldest one that we have is Cheney University in Pennsylvania, which started in 1837, way before the end of slavery. But as you know your history, it was against the law for a Black person to gain an education. It was against the law for a Black person to be taught, and so therefore that was an illegal activity if you're caught working and trying to help someone to learn how to read or write. At the end of slavery, the institutions needed to be created because African Americans did not have the luxury to be able to attend the white institutions that were established. So HBCUs evolved. They started out normally as normal schools, sort of like a high school, and eventually trading type school. And then they have eventually, we have 101 HBCUs, most of them primarily in the southern states, because that was the largest portion of the slaves were in the southern states, even though they were all over the United States, but a large percentage was in the South. So most of the HBCUs were created for that concept. And then when we passed the Civil Rights Act of 1965, there is a statute in there that's clearly state those institutions that were founded for the sole purpose of educating Black Americans prior to 1965 would be classified as historically Black colleges and universities, and they would be eligible for funds to support their mission to continue to provide an education for African American students. Now, as you know, we've had court cases. One particular court case was Brown versus the Board of Education, as you know, in 1954, where it made it illegal for students not to have the right to attend an institution that would provide them with the quality of education, particularly in the public schools. And when that Supreme Court ruling went into place, we started seeing historically white institutions beginning to enroll Black students into the white institutions from that standpoint after graduating from high school. So we've been here for over 100 some odd years, and without the HBCUs in our country, there would not be a Black middle class. And what I mean by that, the HBCUs had a strong foundation in helping to produce teachers, educators, in addition to primary teachers, but also college professors, engineers, all the professional attorneys, medical doctors. They all came from the HBCU platform. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have a Black middle class that we have right now. So the HBCUs have played a critical role in helping this country, and more specifically in helping African Americans to gain a leg up in terms of opportunities to move up economically in this country?
You know, what you said about it being a crime to teach African Americans, particularly slaves, to read and write. I actually read an article that was talking about the fact that the reason why it was a crime to educate African Americans, particularly slaves, was because that slave owners, folks in the South, were concerned that the more information you have, the more you understand that your condition of slavery is not a natural condition.
Right.
And indeed, in order to maintain slavery, you had to keep these slaves ignorant.
Right.
And that's the reason for it. And so I went to Tuskegee University a couple of years ago, and there was a sculpture there at the beginning, right there as you walk into the school. And it was a picture of a person lifting a blanket off of a slave, and it said down at the bottom, lifting the veil of ignorance.
Yeah, yeah.
And that to me was quite powerful. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, you're referencing Booker T. Washington, who was the founder of Tuskegee, and that was his whole core of recognizing that the only way African Americans, former slaves, that would be able to advance, they would have to lift the veil of ignorance off of them, provide them with the education so they can think of their own, so that they can recognize the importance of having families and building wealth within that community to support them. And education is the key. You know, let's go back to our namesake, Thurgood Marshall. If you look at his life, you look at his journey, you know, the legacy that he left behind as it relates to social justice, as relate to equality for all. But the most important legacy that he left behind was education, and making sure that a race of people have an opportunity to get an education, because it will make everybody better. You know, one of the things that I used to enjoy as a college president was graduation. You know, when students start college and when they graduate college. For a first generation college student, you're the first in your family to graduate from college. That means everybody in that family will benefit from your graduation. It is a big, big deal when we would have these graduations and we would tell the students that you can only get 4 passes to be able to pass out to your family members. And they would say, no, we want to be outside for our commencement because we want everybody to come. And we would have people that would bring anywhere from 25 to 30 people at a graduation, because it was a big community type celebration for that one student, because they saw that as an opportunity. If you can get up and you can get out, others will follow from that perspective. So that education is so powerful for people in this world. And African Americans recognize that at the end of slavery, that the importance of making sure you had the right skill set so that you can elevate your community in a way that will help out. And we're still in need of that even today, in terms of providing those opportunities for those who are less fortunate and may not have the resources to move on to receive a higher education degree.
You mentioned that without HBCUs, there most likely would not be a Black middle class. And tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, we're talking about slavery ending in 1865, at least legally. And there's a lot of time between 1865 and 1965. And so tell us a little bit about how HBCUs educated and what kinds of people were being educated.
So, you know, let's kind of go back in time a little bit. If you look at people like Booker T. Washington. I mean, we all know Booker T. Washington because we study him in school. But his book, Up from Slavery, I would encourage you to go and pull that if you haven't read that. But in that book, Booker T talks about the importance of getting an education. And he literally, and this is in the book, where he literally walked from West Virginia to Hampton University. It was Hampton Institute at the time. And when he arrived on campus, he was so determined to, and Hampton was created with agricultural bent as far as providing skills. It was almost like a trade school type skills to keep people, to provide people with opportunities to be able to take care of themselves. But he was so determined to get that education. General Armstrong was the president of Hampton at that time, and he was the first president. And when he arrived there, he didn't have any money at all. And he said, "I would do anything to get this education." And he literally became a janitor. He told the lady, "I will clean the bathrooms, I will clean anything." And they gave him a scholarship, and he worked there, and he got his education, and he went on and became a school teacher. And then General Armstrong saw the need to start a Black trade school in Alabama, and more specifically in Tuskegee, Alabama. And while he was there, he wanted Booker T to be the founder and to be the president of that. And this was the foundation of creating a trade for slaves. He was trying to figure out what can we do to kind of build our community up. So they started that agriculture was a big deal in the South. That was a big cash crop in terms of the land. And they had scientists like George Washington Carver, who was one of the greatest botanists in the world, who worked at Tuskegee, and he used his skill to help train and prepare students for trades and opportunities to be able to build and take care of their families. And that's how it started in that setting. But once they went, and then on the other hand, there was another scholar who challenged the trade thought, was W.E.B. Du Bois. And W.E.B. was a first African-American to earn a PhD in sociology from Harvard, but he got his first degree from Fisk University in Nashville, an HBCU. And he was of the mindset that, Blacks need a trade, that's okay, but you also need to stimulate your mind intellectually. So you need to study the arts, you need to study the sciences, you need not only the science, you need to study the literatures, the languages. And he was more in that vein. But Booker T said, the masses need more than that. And so we need, engineers. We also need farmers who can help with the feeding former slaves. And that became a big debate of during that time. But eventually, the land grant schools took off across this country, and there are 19 land grant colleges that are HBCU land grant colleges. And those schools not only prepared teachers, but they also prepared engineers, but also prepared farmers. They also went into, some of them went into the professional arena because they saw the importance of having, doctors, nurses in those communities. And it was those HBCUs that planted the foundation that allowed people to get those professional degrees because they couldn't get them at those at historically white institutions.
Okay, because at the time, historically white institutions basically did not admit Blacks, isn't that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about some of the graduates of HBCUs that have made an impact, not only in the Black community, but really across the U.S. and around the world.
Well, as you know, some of our most esteemed graduates, as our namesake, Thurgood Marshall, as I mentioned earlier, is a two-time graduate, but one of the greatest ministers of all time, Martin Luther King Jr., graduated from Morehouse College. He actually started Morehouse at the age of 15, and he graduated from Morehouse at 19. And he went on, as you know, became a major civil rights figure. For those of you, if you watched the movie Hidden Figures, in that movie, there were three African-American ladies that really played a major role in NASA's experiment in terms of traveling to space. And those ladies all went to HBCUs that participated in that. Some other famous graduates, Oprah Winfrey graduated from Tennessee State University. She's a major supporter. Langston Hughes was a graduate of HBCU. Howard University here in Washington, D.C. have had a bunch of prominent graduates, not only graduates, but also scholars. Charles Drew, who was a major surgeon that dealt with plasma and was a major scholar who went to Howard and was on the faculty there at Howard University. We have even today, Chad Boseman. Some of you may have heard the Black Panther, so he's a proud HBCU graduate. Felicia Rashad, who played in several movies. She's a proud Howard graduate, along with many others. So the list is very long and rich and powerful in terms of the ones that have done some incredible things, and they are still to this day doing incredible things for this country.
Okay, let's move a little bit forward in time, and let's talk about sort of the civil rights movement and what role HBCUs or its students played really in the modern civil rights. And I know we can start off with W.E.B. Du Bois, who you mentioned, who was part of the Niagara Conference, ultimately the founding of the NAACP. But you can move us forward from there and tell us about their involvement.
Well, as you know, as I indicated, a lot of the activities for during that time took place in the South. And so a lot of the campuses played a critical role. The Montgomery movement that took place in Montgomery, Alabama, where Rosa Parks refused to get off the bus. And there's a university there, Alabama State University. Those meetings that they had, the Montgomery meetings that they had about, it was called Montgomery Improvement Program. Those meetings were held on the campus of Alabama State. I was down there recently meeting with the president, and they have a big display and a monument of where that took place. And that movement changed a lot of the Jim Crow laws in the South in terms of allowing Blacks to be able to benefit from some of the segregated places and facilities. One university where I worked was North Carolina A&T State University. That institution was responsible for starting the sit-in movement. If you go to Greensboro, 4 college students from North Carolina A&T walked from their campus to Woodworth, which was a drugstore, and they sat down at the counter and wanted to be served. And when they sat down, that created a worldwide movement to allow African Americans the same rights and privileges to go into restaurants, to go into movies without being discriminated based on their race. But that started and you can imagine, I want you to go back to your college days and what your parents would have thought, that we sent you to go to school and you're 19 years old, 20 years old, and you're walking and starting a major movement. And that's what happens on college campuses. If you think about the SNCC organization, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that was an organization. Stokely Carmichael was one of the first student leaders who stood up and participated in that. That was founded on the campus of Shaw University in North Carolina. And those movements helped change the world, literally helped change the world. And HBCUs played a major role in stimulating those minds and challenging the status quo and challenging what America stands for, and making sure that America lives up to the words that's in our Constitution, and we follow that to the T. And HBCUs have played a critical role with that in our society.
Yes, I remember as a very young child watching on TV those sit-ins, and the ones you mentioned in Greensboro, North Carolina. It was amazing to me that these were 4 college freshmen.
Yes.
And they had the courage to walk into a Woolworths store, sit down at a counter, and there are pictures of people whites pouring milkshake on their head, screaming at them, abusing them verbally, and to put up with that and to continue that until things changed is amazing to me. What is it about an HBCU, or at the time an HBCU, that you think would have sort of encouraged young people to want to stand up for their rights? Is there something about being at an HBCU that emboldens one to do something like that?
Yeah, I would think so. And what I've read and what I know, and especially I'm thinking about when Martin Luther King was a student at Morehouse, and one of the college presidents at the time was Benjamin Mays, and Benjamin Mays is a giant within the HBCU world, and he was a philosopher, and he would challenge students and would push them to make sure that they were not afraid to challenge the status quo. And I think that's part of the nature of students in general, and using the faculty members to encourage and motivate. And when you become a person that's now in a setting where you can think, and you can also think about what is right and what's not right, and you know that you have the skills that's necessary to bring attention to something, I think an HBCU provides you with that. As you mentioned in the opening, I have 2 sons, my wife and I, and we both of them, my oldest son just graduated from Howard University in DC, and my youngest son is a sophomore at Howard. And what I'm hearing from them in terms of they, as you know, right now, there are no rules in place to say you can't go to, a prestigious, historically white institution. So you have the freedom to go anywhere in terms of that perspective. And my kids also had that, but they picked Howard because when they went on a campus visit, I still remember this, when the student ambassador was walking us around, and I said to the ambassador, I said, so why should my son decide to come? Why should he pick your institution over another one? He said, well, if you come here at Howard, you will be able to find your voice. And that just kind of puzzled me a little bit. And I said, find his voice? Yes, he will be able to be in an environment, a safe space that will allow for him to find his inner self and his voice, like a musician trying to find a certain tune. And you will be able to come into your own in a space like this that will be safe, but you'll also be in a space where everybody around you will look like you. And you'll also be in a space where you're walking on sacred grounds as it relates to the buildings and the names of buildings of legendary African-American figures who have done incredible things for the world. And yet that will seek in you, and you'll be able to, and that will help you as an individual, and that will help you as a person to get connected to your inner self and your identity. And there's something about that is emotional, and there's something about you can't explain it to anyone unless you've gone through it, because there's this closeness of being in a space where you do not have to be anybody else but yourself. And sometimes, we in this world, I believe we figure that we got to play a different role. But no, once you become yourself, then people will respect you for who you are and then what you can contribute to mankind in a way that is very meaningful and positive.
That's a perfect segue into my next question. And that is, people say to me when they understand that I serve on TMCF's board, they say, why do they still have HBCUs? Now that Blacks are allowed to go to any school that they qualify for, why would you want them to go to HBCU? Isn't that really segregating them and keeping them away from the general population where they're going to have to survive and thrive? What's your response to that?
Well, I get that question too, but if you look at what's happening in our society right now, HBCUs are needed more now than ever. This is one place that provides educational opportunity for a disenfranchised race of people, as more specifically a community that may not have the resources, and is a place where a student may have struggled somewhat in high school, but they can go into a place where people will want nothing but the best for you, and they wrap their arms around you and providing you with an education so that you can learn and be someone that's going to contribute to society in a way that's going to lift not only you up, but your family and your community up. HBCUs pride themselves in working with students who are from low-income communities. And we need that. We really, really need that in this country more than anything, in terms of people who may be in poverty, to have them, to lift them up out of poverty and to help build their self-esteem and build their confidence up, to let them know that you might be here today in poverty, but you don't have to stay in this space. This journey by going to a historically Black college and getting in and understanding, this is what I see from students. I've seen it firsthand as a college president of one at Delaware State, where students come in and they don't have nothing but the clothes on their back and a bag. And they walk in and they know that people are not going to be judging them based on that. They're going to judge them based on how they perform and their character when they get in there. And the schools will provide, with support like TMCF and others, the resources so that they can be in a comfortable environment where they can think. This recent pandemic that just took, that's going on right now, our schools took a big hit, because a lot of the students and some of your members may not connect with this, but the reality is, some of the students, when they were told in March that they had to go home because of COVID-19, we had campuses, literally campuses, where students had no place to go. They couldn't go home. They couldn't go back to their community, because the community, when they left, they were coming to college to start anew. So we had students who didn't have resources to get a plane ticket or to get a bus ticket or to get transportation to go home. And college presidents ended up letting those students stay on campus. All 47 schools had students like that on their campuses. So now with that being said, HBCUs is that place that recognize what you have and that can help you build on that. So your question about, do we need them now? Yes, we need them. We need them more now than ever, because there are more people that are in that category that need that leg up or that support. And now transitioning, HBCUs, not only we serve African-American students, but we have never, let me underscore this, we have never excluded anyone from coming to our campus, Black, white, foreign, international, you name it. We have all of that on our campuses now, and we encourage that. That's something that we see, because we know that experience will not only benefit the African-American community, but it can also benefit the Hispanic community, it can benefit the white community. There are all communities can benefit from that type of experience.
That's interesting. When I was on the campus of Tuskegee, I saw some, women dressed in Middle Eastern clothes, with veils and everything. And I was kind of shocked because I was expecting only to see Black people.
Right.
And then recently I read in the LA Times an article where this Latino woman was graduating from high school, and she was at the top of her class, and she was going to an HBCU. And so the reporter asked her, why would you go to an HBCU? You're going to be a minority there. And the response was very interesting. The response was, well, you know what? If I went to the University of California, I'd be a minority there. And quite frankly, I think I'll be treated better at HBCU than I would at that school, which was kind of surprising to me. But yes, I understand they educate more than just African Americans. So tell us a little bit about what is the current state of HBCUs generally?
Yeah, as I indicated earlier, the pandemic has played a critical role in the community right now. It's hard. The public HBCUs are doing a little bit better than our private HBCUs, and what I mean by that, the resources that the public receive, primarily their states provide those resources. The private HBCUs have to depend on tuition and fees from that perspective, and they don't have a state that's providing an X number percentage of dollars coming in. And so when students had to leave campus all over America, not only HBCUs, but all the schools in this country, and had to shut down and quarantine, those schools had to return dollars back to the students for what they had paid for. They had paid for housing, they had paid for meals, and they had paid their tuition. So they had to get a refund. And all of our campuses, when we receive those dollars are encumbered, meaning that we take it and we spend it on other things. So the schools had to scramble to get the funds, so they had to send money back to the students. Some of our institutions, some of our largest institutions, they were sending back anywhere from $8 to $10 million. And that's a lot of money for an institution that we do not have the large endowments. If you think about, like you said, UCLA, I would think the UCLA endowment would be close to $1 billion, if not more. We don't have that in our campus. We don't have where we have large sums of reserves that we can pull money from in a rainy day. So therefore, that has created some stress. Part of our effort at TMCF and partnering with UNCF, we were able to get the Congress to support HBCUs and provide funding, emergency funding during this time, and that was critical to the success of our students and our institution and the sustainability of our institutions. And the presidents really appreciated those dollars that came from the stimulus, from the CARES that just came through. It played a major role in helping the schools to continue. But your point, it is an effort every single day in terms of providing and having resources to keep these institutions open. And that's why a TMCF, an organization like this, is set up to provide the scholarships to support the students, to take that pressure off the institution when we can, and also to provide them with career, life-changing opportunities and career experiences, because they need that assistance as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned previously that I think you said 70% of the students qualify for Pell Grants. That is, they're living below the poverty level. Is it important? Why is it so important, in your opinion, that we educate, we assure that there is an institution that can educate students who come from backgrounds like that?
Yeah, as I stated in the beginning and in my comments, those communities are very fragile. And the more people that we can help move out of those communities and to move into the middle class, the stronger this country will be. And HBCUs play a critical role in going into those communities and lifting those students up and providing them with scholarships. We give scholarships to students that normally students would say, I would have never received a scholarship if I had applied to X historically white institution. But because you're providing me with this one, it's going to provide me with an incredible start in life. And what we are about is providing students with not only a leg up, but a head start to get ahead in life. And education will do that. There is no question the power of education and what it will do for a whole community is, I can't understate that. And so HBCUs, some of our schools are located in some of the most challenging communities in our country. As specifically, if you look at where our institutions are located in Mississippi or Alabama, or even in Florida, they are in those communities that need them more. And they become an economic engine for those communities because they provide jobs for the people who live there in those communities. So if you take an HBCU out of the Delta in Mississippi, Mississippi Valley is one of our schools. If you take Mississippi Valley out of that Delta, and the Delta is one of the poorest regions in the country, it would devastate that community. Not only that community would be devastated, but the economy would be devastated. So that economic impact by having a school that is in a community that is fragile, but it's there to help lift those who are in that community up so that they can have a better life and a better quality of life from that perspective. So that's why it is so important to support HBCUs, because they are a lifeline of success for this country, and they have proven that in terms of the number of successful graduates and the number of students who have gone on and have done incredible things for this world.
Yeah, I've also noticed that there are students who didn't do so well in high school and may have, for any number of reasons, given up on themselves. And HBCUs gives people like that an opportunity to learn that they are worth something, yep, and to change their lives. And I assume that's been your experience as well.
Absolutely, 100%. As sometimes students may not get what they need in the public schools. More specifically, if you're coming from a community that may be poor, and you may not have the economic base, or you may not, in terms of the tax base, that would provide those schools with the resources to have the latest in technology or the latest in the things that people need to be successful. And sometimes we don't even think about it. I was talking to a president in Alabama, and he was telling me, and Paul, you're not even gonna believe this, what I'm going to say to you, but he was telling me that when COVID-19 hit, he said 15% of his student body returned to their community in rural Alabama, and they did not have Wi-Fi connectivity. They didn't have the infrastructure in their community. And at the time, currently, as you know, all the schools in America had to transition to online. And these students were now going back to their home community, and they don't have the connectivity to be able to access the online activity that's going to come from their school. So they literally had to regroup and go to the old correspondence way, where the students would do their assignments and mail it in to the faculty. Can you imagine that in this day and age, that you have to do your homework assignment, do your coursework, and then you mail it to your professor to grade? You wouldn't think of that not living in Los Angeles that you would have to do something of that magnitude. But those schools serve those type of students, and those students still are hungry for that education. As I mentioned earlier about Booker T. Washington, he was so hungry for an education that he literally walked to Hampton from West Virginia to get that, because he understood the value of that. And these students also recognize that. And when you have an institution that is not judging you from the standpoint of what you may not have, but they're judging you for what you can achieve and what you can get, those institutions play a critical role of inspiring the next generation of students who come from those communities, because they see that someone really cares about them and about the possibility of providing them with a leg up for opportunities.
Well, I completely can identify with what you are saying here, especially about students in rural areas. My great-great-grandfather was a slave in Alabama, and he picked cotton. And my parents were graduates of HBCUs. And so we're going from a slave to a graduate of an HBCU. And then you've got me here. And so, like you say, we've lifted ourselves up, and that's what this is all about. So let me ask you, are you optimistic about the survival and prospering of HBCUs going forward?
I am very optimistic. I'm very optimistic because we are seeing a tremendous amount of support for our institutions from corporate America, from organizations like your organization, and supporting us and seeing the value. Your time on our board is critical. As you know, we have a corporate board, and we have people sitting around that table like you who are interested in supporting these institutions and your company. We have people wanting to do that and provide that type of support because they clearly see the value in having institutions like this. HBCUs is not a body that discriminates, in terms of we provide education to all, and we're proud of that, and we're proud of the fact that we are providing some less fortunate students opportunities and providing and giving them that second chance. Say you didn't perform like you should have performed in high school. Some students are just not ready, and they want to be able to achieve something. HBCUs can be that organization, institution, or body that will take that student who is coming to the institution. They're saying, I am ready and I want this. I want this because it's going to provide an opportunity for my family. And we can take that student, provide them with the necessary skills to get them up to par so that they can achieve the success that we know that they have in you. Our vision for TMCF is clear: changing the world one leader at a time. That's the vision. And we believe wholeheartedly. And what we do know, Paul, and you've heard me say this at board meetings, when we identify you as a TMCF scholar, because we have a pretty rigorous process in working with our institutions and the students that we serve, as I indicated about the profile earlier, but this stat right here will show a clear sign of those students who are motivated and ready to accept whatever challenge that come before them. 97% of our scholars graduate from college. 97% of those students who come and we identify as a TMCF scholar, they graduate. And you compare that to the national average of students graduating from college, which is less than right around 50%. And when you got a 97% success rate, that's pretty good. And those students who come are highly motivated, highly skilled, and want to be successful.
Terrific. We only have a few minutes left. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the success that TMCF had in leading the continuation of funding into the future from the federal government of HBCUs?
Yeah. Thank you for that, and I'll tighten it up because I recognize the time is running by. But as I indicated, the three pillars, and one is government advocacy, where we work directly with Congress to help secure funds for our institution. Just here recently, this year, we've been able to get approved legislation, and this is unheard of, to get a bill passed through. It's called the Futures Act. You can Google it, you can look it up. TMCF led that charge, and the Future Act is a program that Senator Lamar Alexander, chair of the Education Committee, pushed it through, and it passed from the House and the Senate, and the President signed it into law, which is permanent funding annually coming to our institution through a program for that's part of the Title III, which is a entitlement funding program. Every 10 years, we would have to go and ask Congress for these dollars, and for HBCUs, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that go to our campus to help with infrastructure and enrollment. We were able successfully to get it passed this year, where we do not have to go back every 10 years to ask for renewal. It is now permanent funding for our institutions, which is totaling close to over $1 billion for our schools. That is something we did this year. In addition to that, we were able to advocate with other advocacy organizations, UNCF and NAFEO, funds for emergency relief for our institutions. And Congress saw the value of that, and our institutions received over $963 million to help through this COVID-19 challenge that's happening right now. So we've been very successful with support from our friends up on the Hill on both sides, because they recognize that education is bipartisan. Both sides need education from that standpoint. So we're pleased with that. So thank you for allowing me that opportunity to share that with your team.
Well, and thank you very much, Harry, for spending the last hour with us and educating us and helping to lift us all up. And so why don't I turn it over to Mike Cassis, who will say a few words. But again, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Paul, thank you very much for the introduction. And Paul, thank you very much for asking the questions, helping us put the event together. And thanks very much for sharing with us some of your family history. And appreciate what you've done for the firm overall and for our clients. And Dr. Williams, thank you very much for your time and your presentation, and how you're educating us, how the viewers understand what TMCF and HBCU is doing to help promote equality among our communities, among our friends and colleagues and others. There's one thing you said that I found extremely inspirational, is that the HBCU schools, they judge people not from where they came from what you see they can do. And that's really important. I think it's very important for all of us, all the viewers here, to know that we should not be judgmental on what we see people. We should judge people and help them improve themselves based upon where we see they can go. And I think we all need to listen, we need to learn, we need to educate ourselves, we need to discuss and address racial injustice, we need to challenge ourselves to improve the lives of others and our communities. And that's what we, in particular, our diversity committee is doing. I think we all need to take advantage of the tools our diversity committee is giving us, and there will be more coming out. Take advantage of the library, the articles, the books that they've recommended we focus on. Read them, create maybe Zoom book clubs to discuss them among some of our colleagues. Participate in these speaker programs. There will be more. Highly educational for us. Opens our eyes to things that many of us have not looked at and not really focused on or intentionally neglected. And accept the K&L Gates Pro Bono Challenge that Jim this morning just sent to us. Sign up. Be part of our pro bono challenges. We're going to be working with the ACLU in their social justice programs. Now, we working together can hopefully move all our communities to better understand racial injustice, promote equality, and ultimately make the world a better place. But we can never do enough. And frankly, individually, we can do a lot, but working together as a group, as a firm, as a community, we could do many more. You know, we need to make the world a better place. We need to make our communities a better place. We need to stomp out racial injustice. We need to promote social equality. We, as lawyers, and those who help us as lawyers and work with us, one of our goals is social equality, social justice, and that's what we need to do. And we need to work together, educate ourselves, educate those we're with, and we need to not just say we're going to do it, we need to actually participate to help stamp out racial injustice and social equality and create social equality. Take the challenge, take up the challenge. Let's do that together, and we'll all be prouder of our firm, of our communities, and of each other. And again, Dr. Williams, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your insight, and thank you very much for all you're doing to helping us and our communities and our country and the world be a better place.
Thank you so much. Thank you.